Okay, here we go. Welcome to Voices of CX Off the Cuff, our mid-season version of Voices of CX, where we will play clips from previous seasons and discuss how our team here at Worthix uses the insight from our podcasts in an actionable manner to actually get things done here at Worthix. So today I am joined by Hannah Michelle Lambert, who is our marketing and social media specialist. Hey, Hannah, what's up?
Hello.
So today I have Hannah in here because the number one topic discussed by this guest truly was social media. This guest was also a major hit in season 5. His episode was played more than anybody else's for a really long time. And we are talking about the one and only social media god himself, Chris Strub. Now, Hannah, what was your overall impression of Strub's episode the first time you heard it?
I think the biggest thing that he stressed throughout was authenticity and using the resources and the storytelling that you have to be able to best connect with your audience. I think that's the overall theme that I got out of it.
He goes very deeply into helping out nonprofit organizations, which are really close to his heart, right? Even though we're not a nonprofit organization, was there anything that stuck out? Because I know that for example, my sister runs a dog rescue, and I sent her that episode when it came out because I thought it would be really helpful. I thought that most of his content was really spot on and really easy to take into consideration and actually apply to the business. Did you get the same feeling?
Yeah, I think so too. And although we're not a nonprofit and I don't work directly with nonprofit social media, I think the biggest thing was lower budgets and kind of not the norm of what you'd think on social media, like with B2C brands. So I think that there is a lot of overlap with B2B, which is what we are, that you have to work on a lower budget and you kind of have to be more creative to have a good presence on there when it's not all handed to you.
Yeah, good point. So in preparation for this episode, you selected a couple clips from the episode itself. And before I play them, can you just give us a general idea of the topic that'll be addressed before we play and discuss?
Yeah. We're going to be talking about which channels you should be on. And if you are on every channel, how should your presence be catered to those individual channels? We're also going to be talking a lot about video. And that's something that we here at Worthix are focusing on a lot throughout this next couple of months and year. So I'm really excited to talk more about how you can best use video to enhance your brand. And then we're going to be talking a little bit about B2B. He kind of touched on in the episode, and I want to talk about how I actually use that advice to inform the strategies that I actually take in my day-to-day business.
Yeah, it's interesting that he brought that up because that's an actual struggle that B2B marketers face, where they believe that social media isn't a valid channel. And I mean, I've heard it so many times at this point, I'm sick of it. So it's going to be really interesting to listen to his opinion over that and then have you share the practical application of B2B social media marketing as well. Mm-hmm. So let's kick off the first clip here.
We're on a podcast talking about customer experience. For me, I always come from this school of wanting to be available across as many channels as possible. And this is a spot where some of the experts like Dan and I disagree, right? They'll say, oh, you don't want to be on every channel. And I say, wait a second. I think you should be available on every channel if that's where your customers are reaching out to you. You may not have the resources to create a content marketing plan on Instagram, for example, right? Oh, we only have one person on our team, or we only have X number of dollars to spend on ads, so on and so forth. Maybe it makes sense to focus just on Facebook and not try and build a content marketing strategy to build your reach on Instagram, on Twitter, on Snapchat. What I think you should do as a company is sign up for all of these different platforms. Have an Instagram profile, have a Snapchat profile, of course have a Twitter. I love Twitter. And even if you're not using those channels as a company on a day-to-day basis, turn on your notifications. Open up your ears to the customers that prefer to speak to you on those channels.
So Hannah, how many channels is Worthix on at the moment?
Active? Well, okay, so we're active on quite a few, but the way that we're active and the amount that we're active definitely differs. But so we're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. We just got on TikTok, YouTube. Did I say Instagram?
I don't know.
I don't know if I did. We're definitely on there though. But so we're actually on quite a few channels. But I like what he said, that I think that we should have some sort of presence. I think just having the profile reserved for you, because you don't want someone else to go on TikTok or something that if we down the line decide that we do want to do that and it's worth it for us, then we don't want someone else to already have the username. So I think at least bare minimum blocking off the profile so no one else can get it. But like he said, it's being available on there and doing what's worth it to you and what makes sense for you.
Mm-hmm. And also giving customers a channel to reach you if they so choose.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially because we don't really know. I mean, we can even try to imagine, but we don't know for sure the channel of our customer's choice. So being everywhere, even if we're not active, even if we're not publishing on a regular basis, just being available for people to contact us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, in your mind, what do you think is better? To have a channel that's kind of dead, like a no man's land ghost town, or to just have it automatically feed content that you're using on some other social media channel without it being directional, without it being focused on that channel at all?
I feel like it kind of differs based on channel. So for example, like I said, we're on TikTok now. We don't really care about TikTok. So if we just post a funny video on there every once in a while, I don't think that matters. But I think it does come down to like where your customers are. Mm-hmm. If that's going to be important to them and that's going to make us look bad if they go on there and they're like, oh, they haven't posted in 6 months, then yeah, I think it's better to kind of have something else feed into there. So Facebook is a good example. We're not super active on there. That's just not our platform of choice. Our target audience just isn't super active on there and looking for us. But we do feed some of our stuff that we post on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is definitely one of our most valuable assets that I think we have. So I think that it's not necessarily that we're super active on there, but like it kind of appears that way. So you kind of have to like hack it. And if it turns out that Facebook is really valuable for us, then we can actually create like a plan for on there. So I don't know if that quite like answers the question. You don't have to be super active and super like genuine and everything. I think kind of auto posting on there is good, but you don't have to do it that much depending on what your goals are there. Because I think the reputation of Facebook is important. If it looks like we're not doing anything on there, I think that could look bad to customers.
Do you think that there are certain content that can be viewed as a deal breaker for certain channels? Like if you're posting like really boring stuff on TikTok, do you think that that's something that'll actually turn people off from your brand?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you should just like push yourself to post anything and you don't have any consideration for the norms of the platform. So yeah, I think that's a good example. If we post something like boring, like a sales pitch or whatever on TikTok, people are not only going to not seek us out after that, not respond, they're actually probably going to be like, oh, who is this? They're so out of touch. Like they don't even know what we want on here. So like block, or I'm never going to like ever consider them, even if they would have been likely to if they reached us on a different channel or if we use the channel in the right way.
Mm-hmm. This brings me to an interesting thing, which is the fact that Worthix is extremely active on Instagram, which isn't necessarily the platform of choice for a lot of B2B companies. Mm-hmm. What's the strategy behind that? What was the overall idea? Who are you trying to reach? Who are we trying to reach through Instagram?
So I think we're going to get into it a little bit more when we talk about the B2B strategy, like what the examples and the tips that he gave later. But I think generally for us, our plan on there is more of brand awareness. So it's not necessarily like we're trying to reach people who are like, okay, they're going to see our content and they're going to be ready to sign a deal with us like the next day. It's more of a long game strategy where we just want that like brand recognition to be out there. People know who we are. They know that we're a fun company who drinks tequila and like rides scooters and everything. that doesn't necessarily directly lead to sales or anything, but it's still important. And it could also be, although we don't work B2C, we're definitely like a B2B brand. So there's a certain clientele that we have to have. We can't work with individual people, but that also sets us up for later. If we do get something that's more like on an individual basis, then we're kind of setting ourselves up for that.
Awesome. Okay. What's Chris's next clip? And give us a little intro before I play it as to what our listeners should expect from this clip.
So we're going to call him a god of live streaming too. He live streamed in like all 50 states or something?
50 states. First person to live stream from all 50 states.
Yeah. So he's going to talk about that a little bit more and talk about how valuable that not just live streaming, but video in general has been to helping these nonprofits thrive and show their brand on social media.
In fact, more nonprofits have a Facebook page than actually have a website. So it's not so much let's get you on there anymore. It's let's install the confidence in you to actually take full advantage of these platforms and these audiences that you have built over the last 5, 10, 12 years. So for me, a lot of that has been stepping into the video space, the live video space. And my work primarily focuses on really encouraging these nonprofits to understand that people want to hear from them. They really need to develop a deeper understanding of what's going on in their communities. And the nonprofits have these channels at their disposal. I'm kind of there to be a battery, an external battery is how I like to refer to myself sometimes in the sales process. Like I'll come in and help you create a supercharged set of content during these high value days of, the giving days.
So live video streaming, how popular is that nowadays?
I think before Instagram Live was a thing, it kind of fell off for a little bit. I mean, there was Periscope, I think, was the first live streaming thing. It was used for a little bit, then kind of fell off. Then it connected with Twitter. So I think it had a very niche but motivated audience there. And then there was kind of nothing. But I think with Instagram Live, it definitely has picked up a ton because it's so low effort. It's so easy. And if you're showing something like, let's say you're setting up for an event or you're prepping for, I don't know, some big campaign to launch or something, it's a really good way to give people all kinds of information. So whether that's behind the scenes, I think is the easiest thing to do. But if you also just want to go on live and answer questions, it's a good way to interact with your audience. Or if you want to just explain the thought process as you're like creating something, I think there's so many different possibilities for it. And Instagram Live has made that just a lot easier for people and also a lot more accessible to watch it. Because I'm not going to go on Periscope or whatever and like type in someone's channel. The fact that it's integrated into Instagram, I think is really, really helpful.
And it's right there on the stories when it's live, right?
Yeah. And I think it goes to the very front too. So you might see other people's stories are more recent, but anyone who's live that you're following will be right there.
And there's LinkedIn Live as well. That's kind of a newer thing, right?
Yeah.
Do you sense that that's an increasing popularity, or do you find that it's more difficult for people? I feel like people consider LinkedIn to be a work platform, so they feel comfortable on the platform even when they're at work.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that consuming video content on LinkedIn has been a thing?
I think so. So Dan Gingiss, a friend of the podcast, he has his LinkedIn Live series that he does. It seems like that's the trend that's happening now, is not necessarily so much spontaneous stuff. If it's going to be more spontaneous, then you do that through Instagram or Twitter or whatever. But it's really good for scheduling. If you don't have a podcast or whatever, it's a good way to get your face out there and get people on there. So I think that's becoming a trend, but not so much the behind the scenes kind of thing, more thought leadership stuff on LinkedIn.
Now, going into video content in general, not necessarily live streaming, we know that there are a lot of benefits in producing video content, in releasing video content. For you, what are some of the main pluses? Why do you think that companies out there should absolutely get on board the video content bandwagon?
Tons of reasons. I think one, the most concrete, is the way that the algorithms on social media respond to videos. So if you post something just text, that has probably the least likelihood of getting seen and behind images, which are behind video. If you see video like that, the algorithms know that that's what people want, so it pushes it up. But aside from that, aside from the way that it's going to interact with those, I think people just like seeing videos, especially if I'm scrolling on Twitter or something and I see a video, it immediately catches my eye, especially with the captions on it. That's really good for if you're at work, if you're doing B2B stuff like we are. We don't necessarily want to make them listen, but we want them to hear what we have to say. So I think it immediately catches your eye. Anything with motion, I don't know if it's some kind of a psychological thing or something. It might be that it looks good to you. It makes you want to learn more, a lot more so than just text, because you can see what's going on. If you see text, you have to actually focus in on that to see if you want to focus even more.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And so the whole idea behind even making video content out of this podcast kind of streamed from that idea, didn't it?
Yeah.
What else are you doing with Worthix video content wise?
So we've been playing a lot more with storytelling, because I think that's a huge thing. I keep saying B2B, but that's what I'm doing. So we're just going to keep talking about B2B. But especially for B2B, is that you can't necessarily have all of this user generated content of people using your products or more lifestyle-y, fun content. So the best way to represent your brand without it being just a big sales pitch is just storytelling and creating that message around your brand, something that people will connect with. So we just ran a LinkedIn campaign about the wet towel story that everyone go check that out on LinkedIn if you want to see. It was a great story, but it's just getting you. That's how you connect with people. They could read it in a blog post or something, but the chances of people, of everyone that you want to read it, actually reading that, yeah, some might, but like not everyone. You just want to make it easy for people to connect with you. And I think that video is perfect for that.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you 3 questions on video content, and you try to answer me as honestly as possible according to your reality here, but also taking into consideration our listeners and how they could apply this to their business. Okay. So number 1, what's the best format of video to use on social media for reaching other companies? So B2B.
I think shorter videos for sure. It doesn't have to be like 10 seconds long, but if it's 15 minutes long, realistically, people are not going to watch that if that's the first time they're coming into contact with you. I think anywhere between maybe 1 and 3 minutes, that's the best way to do it. Having lots of graphics, not just one person sitting in front of the camera for 3 minutes straight. Like do something, an intro, an outro, some music, some like graphics and everything, transitions that will help get people's attention and just not monotone. I think that's pretty self-explanatory, but if you have someone who's super animated in the way they talk, whether it's just their voice or the way they appear when they talk, I think that that's a pretty good start. I mean, on content, that definitely varies from business to business, but I think that that's a pretty good starting point for people.
You touched up on my second question, which is, should anyone do video content?
I think no, but I think you should give all people in your company a chance to try it out because some people might surprise you, honestly. And this is a problem that I think we run into is that we have a very selected number of people who
it's
are,
you and me.
yeah, it's literally just us. Our faces are everywhere. And we even noticed we're getting sick of our own faces. So I think not only will it help those people get a little more experience, try something new, but it's also like more just visually interesting for people to see like, oh, I've never seen this face before on this page. But I mean, if it's not their thing, it's not their thing. You can't force it to be, but give them a try.
So if there's someone who isn't really camera ready, let's say, who doesn't have an outgoing personality, who might be a little bit shy, what are some of the things that you would say are deal breakers?
So actually, okay, I'm going to revise what I said before. That it doesn't necessarily always have to be a deal breaker. Like I'll go into those, but I think that if people do have these things that aren't very good for you, then maybe put them on camera with someone who is super comfortable. So for you, example, you're pretty good at getting people to talk and like carrying on the conversation, making people feel comfortable. So if it's someone that like they're a genius, they're super brilliant and they have a lot of good things to say that would be super valuable for your audience to hear, just don't stick them in a room by themselves because anyone's going to be awkward. Even the most confident person, that can make them feel a little bit like at first, but put them in with someone else and put things in place to make sure that it's like the best possible recording that you can do. And just don't force it on them all the time. But I think you can still make it work. But deal breakers, you don't want someone who is like, they don't even look sure of themselves. They could be super brilliant. They could know exactly what they're talking about. But if they don't exude that authority, then that's kind of what people are going to think of your brand.
Last question. Live or pre-recorded?
So this is something that we have been doing many, many webinars, and it's a hybrid. So I fought you on this, so you're right about it. But I think the best thing to do is a simulated live. You pre-record it, and you do all of your edits and everything, make it look good, but then you do a live premiere. And I mean, you're technically like making it seem like it's live. Realistically, people know that it's not actually live because there's all this music and edits and graphics and whatever that you just probably can't do live unless you have some crazy like movie studio team behind you.
Dan's got a great platform that he uses.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. So, I mean, unless you have that, but not everyone's necessarily.
Add that to the show notes,
Yeah, not everyone's necessarily on that at that point. So I think that just the FOMO aspect does have a lot to do with it, that people are like, oh, it's premiering now. Realistically, this could have been filmed a month ago and ready like and edited like 2 weeks before. But if you just make it like, oh, this is dropping now, and then making it available on demand later, but don't necessarily tell people, oh, it's going to be live now, then on demand later. Make it seem like they're going to miss it if they're not there at the moment that it starts.
Let's go back to Chris and his next clip.
So in this one, he is talking about the B2B strategy. Specifically, you had prompted him just since he was talking a lot about nonprofits were B2B. So you were asking for his advice on there. So he had some things to say.
In general, what sort of advice would you give to our listeners who are in organizations who sell to other organizations? And how should they position themselves on social to somehow contribute to that experience of the person who's on the other side?
It's a great question. With the way that you describe things where there's not as much interaction, certainly I think there are still listening opportunities. Mm-hmm. No matter what you might think your expectations are in terms of that engagement, it's still critically important to be able to listen if your B2B brand is posting anything anywhere and somebody replies on it. It still makes sense to have that ability to respond quickly. I think it's okay to, in that case, maybe to be a little bit more illustrative and use these channels a little bit more as in the way that I think too many B2C brands are already doing, which is to make sure you put your best foot forward. But my instinct, Mary, always tells me to go back to this second time we'll reference Brian Kramer, the human to human aspect of things, right? People want to do business with other humans. So, maybe we're moving away from this institutionalized perfection where everything about the brand just needs to be, flawless in terms of the presentation, and think about how we can advance the personal branding of some of the leaders of these B2B companies who are interacting with one another, or if you're a salesperson, let's say you're using LinkedIn to be communicative with one another. Now there's more ways than ever to be able to extend your personal brand, to be able to demonstrate the human side of who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do. And you can take an action, like Mary has, and host a podcast for, 5-6 seasons.
Yeah.
where you're not only demonstrating the depth of your personal knowledge in your field, but you're also intentionally interacting with a lot of the other people in the space.
So Chris actually touched up on one of my favorite subjects, which is about doing human to human marketing. Mm-hmm. And most of all, there's another element in there, which is how to be customer centric, even in your social media strategy. So firstly, meeting customers where they are. So understanding your demographics, understanding your persona and where they hang out, and then reaching them there. Mm-hmm. But number one, I think, and this is the most crucial part, understanding that you're not communicating with a business. There's no such thing as communicating with a business. You are communicating with a person that happens to work at this business. That doesn't mean that person doesn't have their likes, their needs, their wants. They don't have hobbies. They don't have interests. So, I'm not talking about getting really obscure, but if we're able to connect with the individual that sits behind the desk truly and reach them, then you're getting the job done. Mm-hmm. So, number one thing, understanding who it is that's sitting behind that desk and reaching them, finding them where they are in the channel that they're on. And number two, understanding that it is human to human and not trying to tailor your message according to what that brand stands for, but to what the people who work at that company, the people that you're trying to reach in the organization, what they stand for. Mm-hmm. Thoughts?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple different ways that I have interpreted the human to human thing. The first is what I decided to talk about again later is the Instagram thing. So we are definitely a little bit more rambunctious on Instagram. We're not super clean cut. We're not raunchy or anything, but we're definitely a little bit not what you'd expect from a B2B. But I feel like that's actually, it might be refreshing to some people. And I've heard it from some people, like I've never seen like a B2B brand who's actually like fun on social media, that it's like, it's something really cool and I enjoy seeing your posts and I laugh sometimes. So I think like that in itself, like is recognizing like the human aspect of it is like these people, just because, yeah, they have jobs to do and there's some like super high up executive and they couldn't be at the stuffiest company ever, but maybe that's what they like want is like, they just want to be able to work with a brand who's fun, and we're super professional when we work with clients and everything, but that doesn't mean that if we invite them to a Tequila Friday, that's how we're going to be too. I feel like that it's something different and it'll help you stand out, especially for B2B. Is like, just because you are super corporate-y or whatever in like your value proposition, you don't have to be like that in your brand too. And the other thing about the human to human thing is that all of our material doesn't have to be strictly educational. That's why we don't just do all ebooks and everything, because we have lots of things to say and we have lots of content and everything. But since we recognize the fact that people are humans and they're not ready to learn all about our technology right away. So that's why we started this podcast. That's why we have the blog. That's why we do the CX News. I think the CX News especially is a really good way to connect with people because it's not directly about technology or anything. It's just about customer experience in general and kind of what's happening, interesting things. So like my personal favorite thing to write about is Spotify. I love Spotify. I'm like one of their biggest fans ever. So I write lots of CX News articles about that. So it's fun, it's pop culture, but it's also super relevant to everything that our customers probably want to learn about. They want to know the best and the worst things. If they're someone who's in technology or streaming or something, it could be really helpful for them to know, like from our perspective, what these people are doing right and what they're doing wrong.
Do you think there is the risk, however, of an individual, an executive, whomever, inside an organization that maybe your sales team is currently targeting, that comes across maybe what would be considered your lighter material and takes offense from the stance of the organization and somehow believes that the company should not be portraying that type of behavior on their social media platforms? Because it could be a two-edged sword, couldn't it?
I think it could. And I think you do run that risk. So there's going to be people who are offended by that. And as much as I'd like to say, oh, they're not our people, then we don't care about working with them, it does matter because they could be a big company and we don't want to offend people necessarily. But I think that is the risk that you run, that some people might be offended, and it's making that evaluation of whether you think it's worth it or not. If you're going to have more people that connect, it's the worth it thing, I swear. If you think that more people are going to connect with you and more people are going to like enjoy seeing that side of you, then are going to be offended by it. And obviously don't do anything controversial. Like we try not to, sometimes there's memes that we want to use. That I want to use, and we can't use them because they're a little bit too inappropriate. And I understand. And I think I'm like, oh, it's funny. But to some people, it might be offensive. So I think it's walking that line between like cutting edge and off the edge a little bit. I think you just have to be having multiple people on your team check it out, making sure that people not just in the marketing department send it to other people and be like, hey, what do you guys think of this? If you're ever like hesitant about if you think something's a little bit too risky, then it might be. So just check with other people first. But
so if you think it might cause a problem, it will probably cause a problem.
It probably, yeah.
Awesome. So wrapping it up, the last thing that I wanted to touch on is authenticity and the importance of maintaining an authentic tone and voice, and also a consistent voice across channels. What are your views on that?
I think it's super important because I think authenticity to me, and especially for like all millennials and Gen Zers, authenticity is pretty much like a requirement for brands that you want to work with, unless they have an amazing product or something. But pretty much all products can be duplicated. It's all about the branding. So I think if they come across as like, oh, we're like, when people do things that are quote unquote woke, like for example, when like the Black Lives Matter, all the protests were happening in June and people put out these they looked like they had no heart in them. And there's like, oh, we have to put something out. So we're going to put something out. Things like that can be super harmful to the brand because it's like, you've never talked about these things before. You've never expressed any interest. This is not in your brand voice or anything. I think that authenticity can come across as a little bit offensive. And at the very least, things can just be cringy if it comes off as inauthentic. If you're super funny using memes one day, for example, if you see like someone who's a boomer that works at a company and they use this meme and they use it in the totally wrong way and it looks so cringy, then it's like, you just shouldn't even have done that. Just like know your lane. You love your lane. You're good at your lane. Stay in it. No one's asking you to do anything differently. So I think that it's just, some people try to keep up with trends and everything, but it's like, just have a very like, write out your brand positioning. Like we have a brand guideline that we have obviously our colors and our font and everything, but also what's our personality that we want to have overall and on each platform. Because like I said, our personality on Instagram is different than on LinkedIn, which is different from Twitter. But make sure that those are like a family, and then there's different members of the family on all of the different social media platforms. So just be super clear about that.
Good analogy. I like it.
Thank you.
Hannah Michelle Lambert spilling all of Worthix's social media secrets right here on Off the Cuff. Hannah, before we go, what would you recommend to people who are listening? Are there some companies that people can follow to get good ideas of how to do B2B social media marketing?
MailChimp. I think MailChimp has a really good presence. They do lots of video content, super high quality. I mean, not everyone has the budget that they have, but they're definitely a good guideline to go with and you can do it on like a lower scale, but they have lots of video content. They're super consistent on every platform. And like I said, their brand messaging is also consistent. So it comes across as super authentic.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming. It was great. You walked from your desk into
I know, I had to go all the way here. There was traffic like crazy.
Though. Awesome, Hannah. I hope you guys at home enjoyed the way we broke down a previous episode from the podcast and really talked about its application in our lives here at Worthix. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.